Tipping Spears with Hannah Becker. Today's conversation promises to be an insightful one with a remarkable guest. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a regular listener, we're so glad you're here. Our goal is to bring you closer to the innovative leaders and thinkers shaping our future. And today we're thrilled to welcome Dr. Andrew Whiskeyman. Andrew is a Goodpaster Scholars Fellow and Senior Non-Resident Fellow with the Global National Security Institute. He teaches as adjunct faculty with Syracuse University's Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs, as well as the Air University's Global College of Professional Military Education. He is the CEO and co-founder of JASA Professional Services, providing expertise on the adoption of emerging technology and organizational adaptation. Welcome to Tipping Spears, Andrew.
Hey, thanks, Hannah. And that's a mouthful of acronyms and everything else that you kind of accumulate along the way of being a part of. So yeah, thanks for getting that all out there. Appreciate that.
Well, can you tell us kind of where your story begins?
Yeah, it was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's science fiction land. I did not start where I thought I would end up at all, which I guess is true for many of us, unless you know, like there are folks who know exactly what they want to do in life. Like I want to be a doctor, I want to be a brain surgeon, I want to be an astronaut. They just follow that thread through life. Mine has not been that at all. Peripatetic is the fancy word, makes you sound intelligent, but right, just a meandering along the way kind of path. So I started out with an English degree at the University of Connecticut, thus a little bit of, I figured I'd major in my native language. How hard can that be? But that landed me a job as the fry guy at McDonald's, because when I graduated, we were in the midst of a recession in the early 90s. And who needs an English major? We want science majors, we want everything else. But I did not have ketchup in my veins, as the McDonald's people say, despite having worked my way up to middle management of managing a store. I learned a lot in that experience.
I bet.
But then I enlisted in the Army because I was going to be all that I can be, and kind of the rest is history after that. But that was kind of my startings out of learning the perfect way to manage fry levels at McDonald's back in the day before robots took over my job. So yeah.
One step ahead of automation there.
That's right. Yeah, just always leaping right ahead of it. So yeah, the drones are coming next in the Army, and I retired from that just in time. So we'll see what's next. Next will be professors, and well, we're already there with autodidactic learning and Chat GPT. So I don't know, maybe I'll start gardening soon.
Like that.
At least on a small scale.
Yeah. So what, sparked your interest in the military?
It was desperation, believe it or not. And I don't say that flippantly. It was, I was looking for a way to earn money to go back to school. I wanted to teach for a long time, but you needed a master's in Connecticut to teach. And I just didn't have the money at the time to do that. And so as my wife and I were looking at alternatives, I was like, what could possibly go wrong? The Army offers you education, you get a skill, you become a veteran. Maybe it's not ideal, at least from where I was coming from. It was not not seen as a viable career path in the community that I was in. So I was a little bit of stepping outside of that. I'm like, what, it's 4 years. What's that? Get something out of it. So it was a little bit of just grasping at something for a chance to do something different. And it ended up being a phenomenal choice. One of the best two I've made in life, or three. So that's how that ended up. It wasn't by design of, I'm, looking to be serving the military or serving the nation or any of that. It was more by happenstance. And then from there, just being open to opportunities that came my way.
So was there a particular event or person that served as a catalyst for your career?
Not specifically. I will share a couple of things along the way that I didn't notice looking forward, but as you look back on things, sometimes you see patterns emerge at times. So I enlisted, as I mentioned, in the Army, and my job was a 98 kilo, which doesn't exist anymore. It's now in the 35 series for those Army folks that are geeking out on the MOS nomenclature. But I went into cryptography. So I started working the crypto field,
Yeah.
which was absolutely fascinating and really got me a little bit more involved in the tech path that I might not have otherwise had been on
Mhm.
with the English degree.
Mhm.
So I got involved in computing, signals analysis.
Mhm.
That was absolutely fascinating. I loved what I was doing. But my wife will say she looked at the officer housing and the housing we were in, and she was like, that housing's a little nicer. And you already have a college degree. And I know you like what you're doing, but if you want to stay in, why don't you move along the path a little bit and do
Mhm.
something, a little different? I'm just half joking with that. She's not she's not materialistic. She'd laugh about that. She will when she hears this, or she'll slap me, one of the two. But the I had some senior folks, first sergeant and a platoon sergeant, who really encouraged me as well to apply to officer candidate school.
Mhm.
And so I did, because I loved what I was doing. I didn't want to change. I enjoyed being a non-commissioned officer, but they really encouraged me to take a different path. So my
Mhm.
wife was encouraging me to do something slightly different. They were encouraging me. So I applied, and then I was accepted. So that was one sort of pivotal point of a significant divergence from where I
Mhm.
was in the military. And then I don't know if there was a specific person after that, but I really just started picking different choices. So
Mhm.
I was a big fan of Robert Frost's poem,
Mhm.
The Road Less Traveled. And I just thought to myself, well, what happens if you make those choices? So conventional
Yeah.
wisdom, after OCS, I was commissioned to Air Defense Artillery,
Okay.
which makes perfect sense coming from military intelligence, but the Army bases on needs. It turned out to be another very good move. I had nothing to do with it. It has served me really well, getting that
Mhm.
basis in fires and targeting and
Mhm.
artillery methodology. But after that, the conventionalism was, well, you should always do these sort of steps. And I just didn't do those steps. I went
Mhm.
after things that looked interesting as an
Mhm.
opportunity, or that seemed to fit with my family and not
Mhm.
necessarily with the career. And those just kept working out. So it was really sort of that thing of just living, as opposed to let me follow a prescribed pathway or what the prescribed pathway is. No, let me beat my own path. And
Mhm.
that sort of attitude and the support of my family were critical in that space. So yeah, not like a specific person other than those key initial changes, but it was really that attitude. I think
Mhm.
of trying something different, of testing something out, of not just accepting the prescribed pathway.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting to hear how your kind of journey unfolded. I love that Robert Frost poem, but you bring up a really good question of like, well, what happens when you take the path less traveled? It's like everyone cites that quote, but actually doing it and then like living with the the effects, the consequences of that, that unknown is something not that many people are often volunteering for. So it's really interesting to hear how you kind of really took an adventurous
Yeah.
spirit and
Well, I
followed the trail.
yeah, I think, well, it comes to, you asked about formation or where did you start, and I
Yeah.
started off with the Lucas quote from Star Wars. But
Hmm.
I mean, I grew up watching reruns of The Twilight Zone,
Hmm.
of the original Star Trek. I saw the opening of episode 4 in a theater with my dad. It was the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And so you have this sense of adventure
Hmm.
around you.
Hmm.
And so you just live it out. It's a little different, I think. Those things all influenced me as well quite a bit in terms of thinking about adventures or being on one, or
Hmm.
being in the moment of not exactly sure how things are going to work out,
Hmm.
but hope that they will. And not a hope in a way that's sort of whatever, like a purposed hope, if that makes if that makes sense. So yeah,
Yeah, I like
and
that.
now still on an adventure. So
Yeah.
I don't know what tomorrow's going to unfold like, but it will unfold as it is meant to, I suppose.
So I know, every journey has its hurdles. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the obstacles you faced in your career and kind of how you overcame them?
Yeah, I think there's let's see, career wise, probably a couple. One of them was taking the the different path, right?
Hmm.
So career managers in the army in particular have a set path that you follow that
Hmm.
fits the regulations for what
Hmm.
an officer in your grade and time and service sort of needs to have characteristic wise.
Hmm.
And so there was a little bit of convincing on my part getting them to buy off on an assignment or getting a leader to sign off on keeping me somewhere a little longer than
Hmm.
was the normal path of moves or assignments. So I did 3 tours at Fort Drum with the 10th Mountain Division. I love that area of the country, but folk conventional wisdom is you don't go back to the assignment you came from because that's career suicide.
Hmm.
Well, I went back there 3 times and it wasn't career suicide, right?
Hmm.
So it's fighting those sorts of decisions
Hmm.
along the way to overcome the hurdles of the naysayers,
Hmm.
right? Don't leave the force to go get a PhD because that will be career suicide.
Right.
It turned out not to be.
Yeah.
So, but so that's two of them of just going against the trend and
Yeah.
then being willing to stay that path. Then the third one was probably it continued to be one, but it was a hurdle, but it turns into growth. So oftentimes the frictions in life and the challenges we face, the pruning that we
Mhm.
get
Mhm.
provides us an opportunity for growth that you wouldn't you wouldn't really choose
Mhm.
uh, to be pruned, but you need to be to
Mhm.
grow. And that was I served with light infantry, but I'm not Ranger qualified. I'm not airborne qualified. I don't have any of the we joke about the scare me badges. I don't have
Mhm.
any of those. So when you walk into sort of light fighting units, you
Mhm.
get the check, and the check is the look at your what do you wear, and you're instantly judged
Mhm.
that okay, you're not part of our tribe, you haven't been where we have been,
Mhm.
you don't count. And so you continually have to prove yourself by your work ethic, by the intellectual product the value that you bring to the commander and the team. And so having to overcome that every assignment was is a bit of a challenge, but I think it has helped me hone my approach and how I look in groups. So I do a lot of work right
Mhm.
now with group dynamics and in groups and out groups and understanding how to do organizational change. So all of those challenges where you're the outsider or have to really prove yourself, kind of like Rudy on the football team with Notre Dame in
Mhm.
some ways, right? You
Mhm.
have to prove yourself to get in the game, were helpful. So it was a hurdle, but at the same time, it shaped who I am
Mhm.
and it helped me tremendously in that. But those, I think, were most of them. Besides all the
Mhm.
other ones that people face, the ups and downs in life,
Yeah.
those were the career ones I think that were most formative for me.
Yeah, it's really encouraging to kind of hear your perspective on kind of trailblazing and not necessarily just following the prescribed path or just being kind of the cookie cutter army officer. Here's what this is the path. And as you're talking and talking about how following your interests and doing things a little differently, it's really encouraging. It's something I've been thinking about a lot lately because I realized in my own career I'm always just odd. I'm always like the one, insert whatever. It's never a group of people in a
Right.
similar background or anything. And one reason I'm brought into these groups is because I am the odd cyber person who's from a rural area and understands like real people, not just folks inside the beltway. And
Right.
it's like that's the advantage. That's why I was called in for these things, but it's never a group of, and it is very like standing out in kind of like the wilderness, and it's like there's like a highway that everyone else is going down, and it's like, if you go and you do, you reach these checkpoints,
Mhm.
this is what you can expect. And then it is, in my own career, it feels extremely kind of really, backwoods trailblazing of like, okay, well, what do you do with this, and what do you do next with this? So it's really encouraging to hear how you made a career in multiple sectors with that approach, because I think that's just something that's really not, it isn't talked about. And we do tend to kind of pigeonhole people of like, oh, you have these skills, well, therefore, here's the track for you.
Yeah, well, it's more comfortable to
Mm.
follow a well-worn path, and I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with that. I mean, if somebody wants to be, a neurosurgeon,
Yeah,
you're probably not going to follow a bizarre pathway to get there because of
that's
the
true.
hurdles that you have to hit to
Right.
understand that goal.
Mm.
And so there are absolutely, depending on what it is that you want to do, you want to be hitting certain things, otherwise you will not be able to do the things you want to do.
Yeah.
But there are also, I think, in your case as well, there are ways to have a successful career, enjoy what you're doing in life, make a difference places that you don't have to follow a certain pathway. You can put purpose with your passion and follow
Mm.
different things and opportunities as they come along and thrive and flourish. And I think that's something that a lot of people need to hear as well, especially sometimes our young people who think they have to follow a certain mold. And so you don't necessarily. What are you interested in? And then how do you start finding a way to do things where your talent is tied to your time? I'm not suggesting you monetize every hobby. I don't think that's right. Sometimes you just need leisure. You just need good leisure that does not tie to, oh, I have to make this profitable, like as a side hustle. Great if you do, but you don't have to, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, that's on my mind too. My third daughter's in junior in college this year, so we're
Okay.
spending a lot of time talking about different career opportunities and what she
Yeah.
likes to do and what she wants to do, and just trying to encourage her. You don't have to follow a rubber stamp of things, especially in the
Yeah.
fields you're interested in. Just enjoy what you're doing and enjoy learning and meet people
Mhm.
and participate in the fields that you enjoy, and think opportunities will come your way. So
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. That's a great perspective and a good reminder, Andrew. So, what new developments around modern warfare are you most excited about? I know there's lots of new great
there
things.
are,
What is on your radar? What are you tracking on that you're
yeah.
excited about?
So excitement is probably not the right word. Worried,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
hesitant. I mean, excited sort of encompasses that in a different
Mhm.
kind of way. If you don't think of excited as the positive in it,
Mm.
it I don't know. There's so many. I'll run through a couple and then we'll see if something piques your interest. You want to spend a little more time talking about. But one of them is additive manufacturing and the ability to shortcut in some ways supply chains
Mhm.
depending on the parts required. Now it may not necessarily be at scale, but the fact that you can manufacture a part that you need afloat on a ship and not have to wait for a supply ship to come out,
Mhm.
that's game changing in terms of being able to do maintenance underway, say for the Navy. It would also be game changing for a moon base or a base on Mars, that you're not waiting on a supply ship to come. You can use the materials that you have and you can manufacture that on site. That's incredible. Absolutely incredible in terms of the opportunities that presents. When you look at uh, energy production and storage changes that are coming, again, the decoupling of that from long supply chains involving particularly fossil fuels is game changing, just because of the requirement to supply forces forward with energy. That's that's pretty interesting to the advancements that are being made in that sector. Or in terms of hardening bases, where you're producing your own power and you're storing your own power and you're not hooked up to the broader grid, minimizes vulnerabilities in a number of ways, I think. And then it'd be tough to talk without, artificial intelligence. It's not intelligent, so it's a bit of a misnomer. It just has the appearance of intelligence. But that whole field of opening up is really probably the most dynamic. When you look at that coupled with lethal weapon systems and the ability to have autonomous lethal weapon systems and the ethical concerns that come out of that, when you look at the manipulation of information, I watched a video, I think it was 2 weeks ago, of Queen Elizabeth, God rest her soul, running a marathon in New York City. I don't know if you've seen the clip or not. Looks just like her running the marathon. Well, how do we know what's real and what's not? Are we all about to be in our own Truman Show, for anybody who's seen the movie with Jim Carrey, where everything is fabricated around us? How do we sense what's real versus what's imagined? And that becomes a real challenge on a number of fronts. One is, how do you aggregate data and synthesize the data faster than your adversaries do in terms of making better battlefield decisions? That's one element of it. That's very important from a sense and protect and warn perspective. But the cognitive warfare piece of that is perhaps more insidious, because nation states and even non-nation states who have significant funding from narco trafficking, human trafficking, et cetera, the cost of agentic AI is dropping, and the ability to create at scale is increasing. So at the very point that adversaries of the US or competitors, depending on the group of people that you hang out with in the Beltway, see particularly China, Russia, doing that at scale against the US population, where most people don't even realize they're being manipulated, is really problematic. And we've had divisions in the US since the beginning. That's one of the vulnerabilities of a pluralist society. I mean, there's plenty of strengths, but your enemies don't support your strengths. They go after your vulnerabilities. And a vulnerability is the differences that we do have, and exacerbating those differences. And that's part of what we face right now, particularly with AI at scale, as well as what I've coined. It's the Ph.D. thing. You're always trying to coin something to have some reason that somebody keeps hiring you along. You think you've said something useful. I had a useful phrase once. Going short aside here. You can always just rope me back in. Just give me the shepherd's hook. But you've heard of the term caveat emptor. Most people have buyer beware, right?
Yeah.
So don't just go out and purchase stuff. Always kind of look under the hood of the car. And I thought to myself, with a rudimentary working of Latin, that caveat lector was a good thing for us to be thinking about in our time. Let the reader beware. I'm like, I can start using that, caveat lector sounds great. And then I was reading an old book. I was reading a book about how to read a book by a guy named Mortimer Adler, who had written it back in the 1920s, I think. And I think it was page 42 on the version of the book that I have. I'm reading along, and all of a sudden it says caveat lector. I'm like, yet again, somebody who's ancient has stolen my idea. Every time I have a good idea, somebody ancient has stolen my idea from me. It's infuriating. At any rate, the individual information environment is something I think I've coined. So we'll see how long that lasts. I may find that Aristotle said something in Greek about that. Who knows? But we face one because we're being balkanized in the information space. I mentioned some of the shows I watched when I grew up, when we had 4 channels and maybe 5 or 6 if you had UHF on the TV that you had to manipulate. But by and large, Americans as groups watched the same shows. And when you went to school or you went to work, you talked about the same shows. You had, whether or not you approached the interpretation of that show the same way, you were watching the same material, and it created a cohesiveness within a culture that is otherwise disparate in some of its approaches and subgroups. While the advent of cable TV and now streaming internet and soon to be, write your own story with AI exactly the way you want to watch it, which is right around the corner, it really focuses us on ourselves, which doesn't have that connective tissue then.
Mhm.
So the music I listen to on my Spotify playlist could be very different than yours. We weren't listening to the same FM station, even if we were in the same town together.
Mhm.
And so we stop having common experiences to
Mhm.
share with one another. And that becomes a problem when it is exacerbated by outside actors who want to exploit those differences and make them wider or make the other seem like an other. And so that's really that's why I say I'm not excited about that. Parts of it I'm very excited about the good that can be done through artificial intelligence in a number of fields, but it's the vulnerabilities that we tend to ignore when it comes with emerging technologies.
Mhm.
There tends to be more of a utopian approach to how great things are going to be without treating people as people. Like the seven
Mhm.
deadly sins are still the seven deadly sins. We
Mhm.
still have them. We have to recognize that it's likely that new technology will be used to support one of the seven deadly sins if we don't talk about the ethical approach of it or try to put frameworks in place to help maximize the good and minimize the bad. So sorry for the long soapbox on that, but there's just a lot with tech we could go into with those
Yeah.
things. But I think from a warfighting perspective, those are probably um, three of the key ones that tie to
Mhm.
a lot of other areas. But we could talk Leo with not the sign in the sky, but the low Earth orbit satellites and hyperspectral imaging technology. And we could go on and on with tech.
Yeah.
So
Well, no, I love the individual information environment term. I think that is a really, really good descriptor. Um, as you were talking, kind of describing how things have changed with how we interact in a community and how the information we receive, the way we receive this information changes kind of those communal experiences is just spot on. I know before I started recording, we're talking about kind of where we live and where I am in the Blue Ridge Mountains is a very, very small town. And Andrew, we still have a newspaper that does not post anything online. There's no website. So if you want to receive this newspaper, you have to write a letter to the editor and
right,
he will send it to you. And if you dare take a photo of anything in that newsletter or newspaper and put it on social media, he will cut off your subscription. He is trying to kind of like give
right,
us a
yeah,
throwback. And it was interesting. I know that's like a very small example. But in a digital age, just in my own community, I see big differences in terms of we can go to community events and all of us are talking about, the top 5 little stories in this newspaper, as opposed to if we go to an event and, I consume all this online information in 3 areas. My neighbor is consuming all this information from 3 different, sources, and it makes we feel like we're in total different worlds. Whereas that one very, very old school printed newspaper that gets mailed to our house, that gives us this common experience. And it's mostly just like bear sightings and really funny 911 phone calls. Oh, and
right,
recipes. There's a whole section on recipes, which I have some friends and we'll do supper based every month based off of what the recipes are featured in this.
right.
And that's so different than what's like pummeling us in social media. And I know that's not a warfare example, but as far as like how we're interacting as humans, and you're spot on with kind of those divisions that, yes, they may exist there. My neighbor and I don't vote the same way. That's not a big deal. And we can go to the ice cream supper and talk about the funny stuff in the newspaper. It's really not, but if we're just in this kind of like, it's an individual information environment, and we're being manipulated by our adversaries with mis and disinformation, then like, well, he's my adversary and I'm his adversary. And it really just splits us apart. And I think
It
that is
does.
a huge part of, I think it's hard to define because it's like, well, is that, homeland security? Is that just mental health or public health? Like, how do you define all this? But it has effects, and it has effects on kind of the cognitive security of our nation. And we don't really know what that's going to look like. You fast forward the clock there. And I love your example of the Truman Show. That's one of my favorite movies. And just that awareness that he had of like, all of this is not real. With kind of cognitive warfare, cognitive security, do you have any, I know you're very steeped in it, on the up to your ears on this, but do you have any kind of insight as to what this is going to look like over the next few years, or thoughts, projections, hopes, I guess?
Right. Yeah, it sort of runs the gamut. And
Yeah.
I think part of it depends on us.
Hmm.
And so an ability to have a reasoned conversation
Hmm.
is difficult in some spaces. It just, unfortunately. So one of the things that, because I teach a couple high school classes as well, with our local homeschool group, and debate is a part of the classes, and debate for a reason, like a structured Oxford
Yeah.
style old school debate. Because what we ought to be able to do, and this is sort of the utopian vision of where I hope we go,
Yeah.
is to be able to look at one another with dignity and respect, regardless
Hmm.
of our background, and then argue about the idea,
Hmm.
and not get angry with the person, but
Hmm.
get angry with the idea and let the best idea win, sort of approach. But really try to understand the other person's argument in the best
Hmm.
possible light. And so if you can do that collectively, even in small ways, starting in each small town, starting with each
Hmm.
neighbor interaction, give the other person the benefit of the doubt, really trying to listen to what they're saying, understand their argument, and then using logic and fact, refute the argument, or realize that, well, maybe my position is wrong. I have to have a little bit of humility to realize that maybe I need to listen to what the other person is saying, that I can learn something from them. Sort of like Socrates, he was the wisest man, quote unquote, who ever lived because he knew nothing, right? Which is a paradox.
Right.
But having that sort of approach, I think, is important, and doing that in multiple places and being able to listen to ideas that are not ours or maybe completely antithetical
Hmm.
to our approach to life. It's hard because again, those divisions are exacerbated
Hmm.
to make us angry, and
Hmm.
that's a warning. Whenever it comes to any kind of media, I tell my kids this, I tell students this, anybody who will listen, is if you're consuming content that's only making you angry,
Hmm.
you're being manipulated. There's a
That's a
couple of
good one.
emotions that are very easy to manipulate. Anger is one of them. And by design, if you're just getting fed stuff that you're just getting angrier and angrier, and I see this amongst some friends, they start
Mhm.
frothing at the mouth, right, over things. I'm like,
Mhm.
what have you been doing all day? Oh, I've been scroll. Stop scrolling. All you're getting is that constant negative feedback, which starts to affect one's ability to have a reasoned argument.
Yeah.
And so that's, one of the reasons I think we have crimes of passion that are mitigated, because somebody who's in a state like that takes actions that are not logical or that they wouldn't
Mhm.
otherwise do or are not premeditated.
Mhm.
Well, recognize the fact that you're getting to that point and dial back from it, or
Mhm.
just stop consuming whole swaths of media altogether that aren't helping you.
Yeah.
So that's a huge piece, but that is something that gets manipulated.
Mhm.
Fear, anger, uncertainty. Those
Mhm.
are all things that are, things we get preyed upon with,
Mhm.
uh, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Civil discourse is important. And then I hope that, I think about this a lot. How are we going to have trust in our systems? For instance,
Mhm.
right now, I trust that you are you and you are interviewing me in this podcast, right? But it wouldn't take that long. We had talked about the the Queen Elizabeth video,
Yeah.
right? God rest her soul. She was running the marathon. Look, I can't tell if it's real or not. With 8 seconds of your voice and a short video clip, you could be an AI generated Hannah Becker who's interviewing me, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't know.
Mhm.
You might not know it's not you, right? Just
Mhm.
as it goes. Now,
Yeah.
the beauty of that, I read an article about a woman who had lost her voice a couple of decades ago. I don't know if she had throat cancer or
Okay.
some problem, but she had to, those devices make you sound kind of like a robot.
Yeah.
She had to do that, and her kids had never heard her voice. But through the use of AI, they found a video of her from a birthday party in like the early 80s, got enough of her speaking to recreate her voice. And
Wow.
now it sounds like her. She was crying because her kids actually heard what she sounded like before. That's a beautiful use of technology.
Yeah.
The flip side is I could use her voice to call people and try to bilk them out of money, or right. So
Mhm.
that's the danger of it.
Mhm.
So does it start to get back to the fact that I can only trust things where I'm physically present with you? Like we
Mhm.
would have to do an in-person to
Right.
know that it's really us.
Yeah.
That starts to break down trust in society, and that's a problem
Does.
when you have societies that are based on trust. I trust the government is doing certain things. I trust my local authorities are doing certain things. I trust that the postal system is working. I trust the bank is doing what it is. As those things start to erode, it's really hard to function.
Mhm.
Which is, as an aside, is why almost every philosopher in history has said that lying under any circumstances is wrong because it
Mhm.
erodes trust. That's a
Mhm.
different topic on truth and everything else. So
Mhm.
again, I'll pause there
Yeah.
because I said a lot. So
Yeah, no, it's very, very interesting perspective. I think trust is just so foundational. So kind of as you're describing this, if you remove that, what are we building any of kind of our frameworks or actions or really even connections on? And then to say in 2025 that the only way we could really trust something is all, physically in person could potentially really limit a lot of our everything from work to socializing to even learning. Like this is like jumping in the time machine and going back, which I think is hard in the digital age. It's hard to think, how is that the only way we would gain that level of security? But as you brought up, that's what we're looking at in terms of kind of the lay of the land as far as a society without trust. We're going to be asking these kinds of questions.
and I think I would offer we have been right.
Yeah.
So this is our time with that, but we look back in history at say the snake oil salesman,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do I know that the product that's being sold does what it says it does and isn't going to
Mm-hmm.
poison me? Well, we create a government entity that
Yep.
oversees the Food and Drug Administration that gives a stamp of approval, and we say, okay, I've countered that false threat now by something that I trust. Well, then that gets upended, and you have to create the new thing. So, for instance, would it be blockchain that is a
Mm-hmm.
way to authenticate videos? Because any manipulation in a video feed, you could track. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
there's a blockchain like solution, or maybe it's quantum entanglement where the
Mm-hmm.
state of the qubits is the same. And we know that there's been no break in the encryption. And I know this is you, and you know this is me because of that quantum entanglement as quantum computing develops. I am sure there will be a way that we start stamping,
Yeah.
trust until that gets upended. But it's a continual cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I think the cycle that we're in is that it is hard to trust what you see.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Yeah, it just that's an issue. Although what was Marvin Gaye's song "Believe Half of What You See, Some of None of What You Hear." It's not a new challenge in the human dimension, which does not change. It's one of
Yeah.
my arguments. The
Yeah.
tech around it changes, and how it gets used
Mm-hmm.
changes. But our interactions, we have to have that sense of how we're using it. The other piece, when it comes to AI with trust, is we tend as a nation, I would argue, to be overly trusting of technology.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to look for a deus ex machina solution for our challenges as part of not having a huge population and always looking for a tech innovation to solve challenges in our just the arc of our industrial development, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's technology's made many people's lives much better,
Mhm.
longer, more comfortable, healthier, etc. So that's good. But if I trust what, say, I don't know, Grok tells me,
Mhm.
it might be right, it might be wrong. How do I know the algorithm is correct, or the transparency of how it's coming to its predictive analysis of what's the thing it's suggesting? And then two, how do I know that the data is correct upon which it is based?
Mhm.
Because I could have a very perfect, logical, correct answer that is 100% wrong because the data that it's being fed is wrong, or has been poisoned by an adversary, or is corrupted, etc. So there's multiple, I think, things to be thinking about when it comes to AI and the trust issue that also open up vulnerabilities, vectors of vulnerability that we need to be concerned about as well, as opposed to just, oh, I trust it because it's trained on the entire internet. Well, have you looked in some spots on the internet? Not everything is great. So maybe your answer is not great, or maybe it hasn't been trained on the right data to come up with it's coming up with the right answer, but it's based on wrong inputs. So
Mhm.
there's still a back and forth that has to go on. There's still a human that needs to be in the loop to be
Mhm.
making a judgment
Mhm.
going forward. So just
Mhm.
some other things when it comes to trust that are beyond just the interpersonal ones. It's
Mhm.
the trust we place in technology at times too.
Yeah. So, how do you think technology has kind of reshaped the way that we approach, you know, security and defense? I know you hit on trust. Are there any other ways that you kind of see technology impacting, modern warfare, our approach to defense, kind of that type of arena?
Yeah, oh, it's been a challenge for quite a while. I think the first sense that I have where technology really sort of took a hold of people's imaginations in a
Mhm.
way was the uh, the changes when it came to sail versus steam in navies.
Hmm.
And I say that because as ships become ironclad,
Mhm.
and then you get rifled cannons,
Mhm.
and you more and more projectiles, the weight of ships versus guns versus speed. There's this whole Andrew Krepanich's book Origins of Victory does a really good job of laying out sort of those theories of military victory and technological adaptation. He does a really good job with it. But from that time, at least what I start to see is an over reliance on the technology itself as being
Mm.
the solution, as opposed to looking at fundamental human challenges that it's overlaying. So we have that whole advent of steam versus sail and ships, and then you have an explosion of technologies that come
Mhm.
really late 1800s on. You've got submarines, you have airplanes, you have radio, you have telephony, you have nuclear, air power. It just
Mhm.
keeps going. And the common denominator that I see in that is, oh, this latest tech is going to deter our adversaries. Well,
Mhm.
deterrence is much more complicated than just a bit of tech. But there's oftentimes, read several of the last national defense strategies about deterrence. It's this, oh, we will deter. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, we're deterring. But how? By using deterrence. That's a tautology. You can't use the same word to define itself. So that challenge of tech, I think, is not the technology itself. It's sort of the deification of technology, if you
Mhm.
will, if it's going to save us from
Yeah.
ourselves, or it's going to be the panacea solution for
Yeah.
everything that we need. And that to me traces back at least to that point. It might have been
Mhm.
further, but that's where I am in my studies at the moment. Or I've
Yeah.
got last bookitis for the last thing that I read, and it's top of my head as an idea, which is entirely possible as well.
Yeah.
But those sort of uh, bits of tech that I see, and so moving forward with that, there's the talk about, well, we just need to do more with AI in our systems. Well, maybe, but it's a tool,
Mhm.
and it needs to be treated as a tool, not as the reverse of that, I think.
Mhm.
And that becomes a fatal philosophical flaw in
Mhm.
approach, which sets people and institutions up for failure by
Mhm.
having it disordered in the view of implementation.
Oh.
Did that answer the question? I might have gotten off
Yeah.
track. I got excited about Krepinovich's book and steam versus sale, and I may have started answering a question that you didn't originally ask. So I apologize for that if I did.
No, that was a great response, Andrew. It's interesting you kind of brought up we almost one thing I've been thinking about, and I don't have an answer for, it's just something, especially over the past few years, was we almost, as humans, have we kind of turned technology into this golden calf? Like, do we so badly want it to save us, or are we so like not I want's not the right word for this, but like, do we so like fear it annihilating us that we just kind of want it to be this bigger than it is, not just a tool, right? Like you said, kind of like almost like turning it into somewhat of a deity so that we don't have to take responsibility for, maybe our role or what we're tasked with here on this earth, depending on how you fall, in your own kind of framework with that. But it seems to be kind of across cultures, and it's something I've noticed the past few years of just like it's almost, and maybe that is a human experience we've observed for thousands of years, like the golden calf. Maybe we have this way of approaching technology of like, oh, we want it to be something bigger than it is, and maybe we become more human or more spiritual through our process of asking those questions and testing those limits, and then realizing it is just a tool that we're responsible for, ethical management of. I don't know, but it is kind of interesting. So your description of that kind of hit on something for me, because it's something I've been observing. It's almost like sections of society want technology to be here to save us or annihilate us. And you look at it in kind of the defense strategy, and it's like, what if it is just a tool that further makes the battlefield a little more complex than it was, 10 years ago, and we've got to figure it
Right.
out. I mean,
Right. I mean, that's where I fall at the moment. Is it is a
yeah.
tool? Is where I'm at, and I think it is important to ask the question.
Mhm.
And AI does this in an immediate sense now for us. Of what does it mean to be human? It's
Mhm.
not a new question. The ancient Greeks wrestled with it,
Yep.
reading through Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, and just it's not a new question that we've asked. We're just asking it with a different technology
Mhm.
at the moment. And so asking those questions, I think, is really important, because depending on where one falls on that scope also has a lot to do with how one is approaching technology and its use. And so I think that's an important discussion to have. Sometimes it's hard to have that if people are being othered and seen as enemies, right?
Yeah.
But you have to get to an understanding of, I'm not your enemy. Why do you believe what you believe? What are you basing that on? And it has been a problem, I would offer, at least in my own studies of human history, where you have faith without reason and you have reason without
Mhm.
faith. And you need to have a balance of the two. And it tends to be that in most things. It's the golden mean. It's that
Mhm.
wrestling of what is the middle way for many things, as
Mhm.
opposed to an extreme on either end. Because you do end up with either it, history's replete with stories of things. You mentioned the golden calf, right?
Yeah.
The Israelites in that case are saved by the Lord, getting them out of Egypt, and they turn to a molten image, right?
Mhm.
Well, like, what are you doing? You just saw all this great thing happen. Why did you do that? Or you try to create a Tower of Babel for yourself, and we're going to
Yeah.
create this on our own. Those stories replay throughout history. It's
Mhm.
just an experience of people's approach to what they don't understand,
Mhm.
or to not understanding creation, or how do things work the way they do, or am I really in control of anything, or I'd like
Mhm.
to control things.
Mhm.
And so I want to use technology to be able to control what I have,
Mhm.
despite the fact I don't have control. I don't have control of when
Yeah.
I'm born or when I die, for the most part, unless you take your own life, which is a whole separate
Yeah.
issue. But you don't really have control of things. And so how do you live in being comfortable with being uncomfortable in that respect
Yeah.
of trusting what's coming or what's in your best interest or what's happening despite circumstances?
Mhm.
And there's a number of philosophies that seek to answer that and approach it, which I think is a very common human experience and human emotion. And so enter in technologies that have promises of doing things. And so you end up with that sort of a replacement or a deification of the
Mhm.
technology at times is kind of where my head is of wrestling with why sometimes we think it's going to answer all our questions
Yeah.
or will enslave us, right? That's sort of the
Mhm.
dystopian view of AI is going to take over the world and we're all going to die.
Mhm.
What was that? Oh, what the heck was that movie? There was a movie. Oh, I'm drawing a blank on it. It'll come to me. Probably 3 in the morning. It'll come to me. I want to say it was the Crudes, but it might not. That might not be it. But it was a family of cave dwellers,
Okay.
and um, Nicolas Cage was the voice of the father.
Okay.
Oh, it's going to drive me nuts. Anyway, one of the signature lines was sort of a fear of the outside, and
Mhm.
everything was, well, doing this, doing that, don't do that, or you will die. And it was always you will
Mhm.
die, right?
You will die.
And so it was funny because it was just that fear of the unknown is always death. And you're like, well, it might not be. Something else might happen with that. No,
Mhm.
you will die. So it was, I think it was The Cruise. I think was the name of the movie. But anyway, post production, you can check my facts and see what the movie was, or put it in the show notes, or whatever. Yeah. The views
Yeah.
expressed were that of Andy Whiskeyman and not the show. He's quoting movies that don't exist, some AI thing that he saw
It's
and
some
it,
AI
made
thing.
up. Yeah,
Oh, that's a great example. It's interesting. I hope as a society we continue to kind of ask these questions when it comes to AI and continue with the, what is it to be human? So so what
we need
career
to. Yeah.
Yeah. So what career advice do you have for the next generation of professionals interested in, this career path?
Well, apparently it's not learning how to code because AI is going to take all the coding jobs, right? I read something in the New York Times about a number of computer science students that are unemployed because
Yeah,
basic coding jobs are just not needed anymore.
yeah.
So don't shoot behind yourself.
Mhm.
But I mean, we all get. I mean, you make decisions based on whatever. Classical liberal education is a good way to go to be well rounded and hopefully
Mhm.
adaptive. Not minimizing the hard work that computer science students
Mhm.
went through at all, but it's follow what you're passionate about. I think is the biggest thing. At a certain level of making money, making more money doesn't make you more happy.
Mhm.
It just that I think that's true across the board. And so following what you want to do, I think is really important when it comes to studies or pursuit of your talents and taking stock of where you have a talent and figuring out how to employ that. And knowing that there are a lot of opportunities I think that exist to follow besides just some of the conventional wisdom of go to college, get a degree, get a job. I don't think that
Mhm.
that's for some, yes. I think we all need to be lifelong learners,
Mhm.
but I don't think everybody has to run off to college
Mhm.
and get a degree and like that path is changing
Yeah.
considerably. So I think there's a number of things that people can follow. So and connect. The other piece is you don't do this in isolation.
Mhm.
So if you like information, for instance, or technology, there are a number of professional organizations that are about that. Well, join one of those. They're not too expensive to join and get involved with the people who are already involved in the field
Mhm.
because you will learn from them. You will make human connections. Opportunities will come along, which will lead to jobs or schooling or insights or something else that you didn't possibly consider. that opens up. So you have to get involved, and then read broadly. And I don't remember, that was another question, not about books. Sometimes it is, but read really, really broadly. Read some ancients, because they've stolen good ideas before,
Mhm.
and challenge yourself, because I fight this fight in some circles in academia, because there's a big push to get away from books and just read articles, or
Oh,
only view a podcast, or
yeah.
this is, okay, those are all great. Articles are great, podcasts are great, because like this forum right here is
Mhm.
not a short clip. It's a
Mm-mm.
longer discussion,
Mhm.
which lends itself to a different level of depth. And there's
Mhm.
others that do that. And I think it's a beautiful way to explore a topic more deeply, or topics
Mhm.
more deeply. But a lot of things don't beat a book, because holding an argument and holding an attention span and
Mhm.
wrestling with what an author is saying over a longer period of time is really important, and it's an important
Yeah.
skill. And so for younger people who may not be reading books, start reading books. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's hard to start, but it's important, because it
Mhm.
trains your brain to start thinking a different way, and to start interpreting facts differently, and
Mhm.
approaching arguments differently. So I think that's really, really important. And read some hard books. Read some fun books, but read some hard books too.
Do you have any recommendations of books or other resources that, organizations, courses that you found particularly useful in your own career journey?
Yeah, well, I think uh, from a from a well, I love being in the army, so I think
Mhm.
everybody ought to join the army or the reserves or something.
Yeah.
Just, or volunteer at your local firefighters, or
Oh,
I don't know, community cleanup. Do something outside of yourself, I think,
yeah.
is the bigger piece. It doesn't, in some respects, it doesn't matter what the organization is. Go
Mhm.
to your local humane
Mhm.
society, volunteer with something in the community, but do something that's serving something outside of yourself.
Mhm.
I think is an important step, and I know it has been for me. I get a
Mhm.
tremendous amount out of things that I'm doing that are not paid, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I think that's good. Uh, Book wise, uh, G.K. Chesterton has been a big one for me
Mhm.
lately. A lot of people are like, "Who's Chesterton?" It's just pen. Sometimes I get asked, "Is that Winston Churchill?" No, it's G.K. Chesterton. So for those that don't know, if you've ever read the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S.
Mhm.
Lewis, or you've ever read Tolkien's Lord of the Rings series, Chesterton was an influence on Lewis, a significant influence on Lewis, and a significant influence on Tolkien. So I'm a big, what is it, ad fontes in Latin? I may be using up all the Latin that I know at this point. I think I have. But at any rate, to the sources. So go back to the source where somebody's taken things from.
Mhm.
And Charles Dickens was an influence on Chesterton, as some
Mhm.
others. So reading who influenced the stories that you like give you a different insight into that author or to their approach. And Chesterton wrote, I think, some very prescient things the
Mhm.
back at the turn of the last century about relativism and some of the challenges we face with trust and truth today. So I find him particularly insightful with that.
Mhm.
But then, reading Sun Tzu, I think,
Mhm.
is important, because there's certain truisms that are sensed in warfare that are timeless, regardless of the technology that's
Mhm.
used. Shakespeare, as an English major, just because of the human elements that don't change, that he tells in a very masterful way. I think once you figure out the cultural language references that seem archaic at times, but I think Shakespeare is important to read. And then the story of human history in scripture. I mean, you've got
Mhm.
all sorts of things. If you don't read those, it's tough to understand the human person, at least not in a
Mhm.
truncated form. And so those are all important foundational things to be at play, I think, and then you could name a philosopher: Aquinas, Augustine, Aristotle, Plato.
Mhm.
A whole host of them are important to read.
Mhm. So what exciting projects are you working on now? I know you have irons and many fibers. But can you tell us kind of what you're focused on here in 2025?
Yeah, sure. I got a couple of things. So I was lucky. I was with the National Defense University up until April, uh, but I was taking advantage of hybrid work. So I would be there when
Mhm.
I needed to teach or work, and then I live in Florida, and my wife is quite happy with the palm tree in the front yard. So she didn't want to move when I retired from CENTCOM, which I can't blame her, after dragging her around all over the place.
Mhm.
So we're settled here. But with the change in philosophy of you got to be at work 5 days a week in the office, that became untenable, and so I had to leave. So I love teaching. So as you
Mhm.
mentioned, I'm still doing some teaching, which is great. I teach an emerging tech course with Syracuse and now a Polytechnic university that just stood up. So I'm teaching
Oh, wow.
a tech class, which is very exciting to me. I don't know
Yeah.
about my students because they got to listen to me talking about tech all the time. But their culminating project is a video. They have to use AI to create a video talking about a technology. So they get to actually play around with technology and how it
Ah,
generates. But that's their capstone in the course. So that's a
yeah.
teaser for anybody that wants to attend the class. So I'm teaching, and then I'm involved with a project with the Army through a contractor. They've decided to combine psychological operations forces and their IO forces into one career field. And so I'm got a little bit of a gray beard now. I dye it that way to look the part. I'm not really that old, but uh, I'm playing the role of a gray beard and
Great beard.
helping them frame frame the solutions to that
Mhm.
out, just given the 3 decades of time that I had
Mhm.
sort of working in it. So that's been really enjoyable for me, working on that and seeing the Army coming around to
Yeah.
pivoting to the future of where technology is going and how do we get out ahead of that, which
Mhm.
it's heartening
Mhm.
from a defense perspective.
Mhm.
And then the third piece is starting to work with localities. So I
Mhm.
started to do some work here in Florida with water utilities
Mhm.
and doing sort of emergency response planning, critical infrastructure security. As you look across a 360 security. So not
Mhm.
all that long ago, there was actually a cyber attack against a water treatment plant in Oldsmar, Florida. Like
Mhm.
Oldsmar, Florida, yes, they tried to overchlorinate the water, poison the water supply. So, but all communities are vulnerable
Yeah.
who have gone all digital.
Mhm.
And so you look at, okay, well, do you need to start building in some mechanical fail safes? How do you train your people to look for where there's a problem? What do you do cognitively?
Mhm.
Because here's the other downside to this. It'd be bad enough if you had a cyber criminal attack your water system and hold you hostage, right? For ransomware, which is
Mhm.
we didn't talk about ransomware and the downside of AI, but that's a whole other
Yeah.
nefarious growth industry, right? But what happens when an adversary takes advantage of that by undermining other security? So look at what happened a few years ago with the wildfires in Maui.
Mhm.
Did the Chinese send any help, any firefighting equipment, any medical aid? No, but they sent a whole bunch of disinformation.
Mhm.
The US government started the fire. The US government doesn't care about Native Hawaiians. The US
Yeah.
government would not, right? They went right after hurt, not help.
Mhm. Mhm.
Same thing happened when it came to the hurricanes last year
Mhm.
that struck the East Coast in the US. Didn't send any help, just further exacerbating distrust in the government, in the response,
Mhm.
and everything else. Well, that's the cognitive piece I think that municipalities are not certainly not
Yeah.
focused on.
Yeah.
But you have to get out in front of the narrative, which is exacerbated by artificial intelligence and the
Mhm.
speed at which you can generate false narratives, inject them into the system and let them run wild, which can cause panic. And that's
Mhm.
with AI. I don't know if you remember the radio program by Orson Welles, War of the
Yes.
Worlds.
Yep.
That was just radio that created panic,
Mhm.
right? Well, think about AI now and the ability of somebody to create panic in a population based on what looks real on your TV, on your
Mhm.
stream, on anything else. So, yeah, those are. Sorry, that was another winding. I got off on a rabbit trail on the stuff. Apologize again for that. I'm so excited about this topic. It's hard to contain it all into a short answer.
It is a very important topic, Andrew, and it impacts everyone, whether they would realize it or not. So
Right.
I appreciate your
Yeah.
your enthusiasm about it. If
Right.
only everyone in the US would get as enthused about it, then we would have a very hardened attack surface
We
cognitively.
would. We'd be having block parties on cognitive
Right?
security. It'd be awesome. Yeah. I'm trying not to do the political thing. Well, thank you very much for asking me about the economy. Let me point you to crime statistics and how they have fallen. Right. Yeah. Answer the question you wanted to get, not the one you did. Technique. So
Well, do you have any, I know we've covered a wide array of topics, but do you have any kind of final words of advice or kind of parting thoughts for the audience as we wrap up today?
I do. My last tagline, my last, I think, original thought, we'll see if somebody else didn't say it ahead of time, but it's something I've been talking about, particularly in defense circles.
Mhm.
So you've probably heard it said that amateurs talk tactics and
Mhm.
professionals talk logistics. And I think that's absolutely true. The ability of the US to project power anywhere is based on its ability to supply. And the logistics lines are nobody else around the world can do that.
Yeah.
They just can't. It's amazing. We could pick up a whole city, move that whole city of 100,000 plus people around the world and keep them supplied with ice cream in the defects
Mhm.
and and weapons and it's incredible. My addition to that saying is that professionals talk information because we say that all warfare is cognitive, but we don't oftentimes actually mean it.
Mm.
And by that, I mean, we become enamored of precision strikes, precision lethal weapons. And I think it's a good thing because you minimize civilian casualties as you're really trying to prosecute a war. And America really does a good job of trying to do that. It's hard,
Mhm.
but trying to do that to minimize other damages. But if all you're doing is killing your adversary, if you don't kill every single one of them, you're just going
Mhm.
to keep fighting. You have to
Yeah.
convince them they have to do something different. And that's the gray space right here, right? And that's why I say professionals talk information because it's beyond just being able to execute a tactical level operation or resupply an operation. What is the raison d'etre for why we're doing what we do? And I've just exhausted my French besides bonjour. So, what are the reasons that we're doing something and what's the outcome? So, if I'm going to deter, these are not the droids you're looking for, right? If I'm going to deter my adversary, what does that really mean? What is one's adversary or competitor really thinking?
Mhm.
And how do you compete in that space when it comes to perception, influence, compellence, et cetera?
Mhm.
And so that really is a different level of approach, I think, to national defense
Yeah.
and national military strategy that more people need to be paying attention to, as opposed to just always looking at the technology and how it's going to affect the tactical fight. Very important, but it's a saying, I think it's been attributed to Sun Tzu. I'm paraphrasing it, but uh, strategy or tactics without strategy is the noise you hear just before defeat. I don't know if Sun Tzu actually wrote
Yeah.
that or not, but it's sort of attributed to that sort of
Yeah.
thinking. Of you can be absolutely brilliant. America did it in Vietnam, won every single
Mhm.
tactical battle, but you don't end up necessarily winning the war because you
Mhm.
haven't thought through the cognitive end state that you have. It replays itself with the Taliban. We could still be
Mhm.
fighting in Afghanistan. If you don't convince your adversary to quit, you haven't made the changes that you needed to make. So is it really worth getting into in the first place if you're not going to get to the end state that you want to have?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that
On that happy note,
and the happy note, because it gives them lots to chew and mull over.
right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for coming on the show and sharing your insights. I really enjoyed, hearing about your career journey, and I know your contributions to our nation have impacted so many.
Well, thanks. Thanks for the invite. It was a lovely conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it and can't wait for the episode to air. So
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning into this episode of Tipping Spheres. We hope this conversation has sparked new ideas and challenged the way you think. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and we'll catch you next time with another exciting guest.